Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. Um, what is roughly today actually on the So thank you so much for this kind introduction. Um, so as you know, our topic of discussion today is unstratified lives, caste identity, and Muslim marginality. And we have our honorable speakers, Dr. Sadiq PK and Dr. PC Saidalavi, I think who are very much um, has expertise in this respective topic. Um, Before taking much time, I think it's already a bit late, and without taking much time, I think we can directly enter to the discussion. And before that, I would like to give an outline. So, our mode of the session will be like in a conversational form, and I would like to ask some questions from my side to each of the speakers. But I'll try to keep up the conversational flow between them. That will be my major task, as I'm not an expert in this field. And so yeah, let's begin. So I would like to begin with Dr. Sadiq PK. And our topic of discussion is um, caste identity and Muslim marginality. So this has three major terms, concept for that matter. One is caste, and second one is identity and marginality. So I wanted to start from the idea of marginality and how does it work um, among Muslims in an Indian context. What does the idea of marginality mean? So we have various governmental documents or reports, official reports that historically mark how Muslims have been marginalized or how Muslims are living in the margins of this country. So I would like to start from Sadiq PK by asking how does this idea of marginality work among Muslims in India?
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Uh, our title is Unstratified Lives, Caste Marginality and
Um, Caste
Identity.
identity and Muslim marginality.
Muslim Marginality. So we all know that the marginality as a question of uh, Muslim empowerment or a Muslim problem is often being discussed in movements, state, and various other people already have been a lot of debate and discussion around the concept of marginality and Muslims. Uh, Many of these discussions evolving around how uh, the marginality can be overcome, how Muslim can be empowered uh, through the recognition of marginality by state and getting some kind of get into some kind of welfare schemes or affirmative action from the state. Uh, so various attempts, as Manshad rightly pointed out, we have a clear-cut document like Sachar Committee report that clearly outline the Muslim marginality in India at various aspects, social, political, economical, and even their identity concerns. And even now, everyday basis, many Muslims now facing a kind of existential question on their even their citizenship. Everyday life is seemingly questioned by social and political forces in India. So, the marginality is often discussed, thought about Muslim circles, and even Muslim marginality thought about state itself. State have even started this kind of thing. But in India, why uh, the recognition of marginality by state agencies or recognition of marginality of Muslims by even various social movements, etc., etc., is happening. But the question still pertaining the marginality statics are increasing day by day. If you can see that no various aspects of everyday life, Muslims are facing discrimination, and even now in many states you can see that citizenship, the question of citizenship itself, that is the right to have a right itself under the question. So why this? That is the this is one of the point that I want to emphasize here. Why the Muslim marginality, the recognition in one level happened, but the problem in one way the recognition is happened, but the question of marginality is never addressed by state or other agencies. So here you can see one fundamental problem, that how in India the perception of marginality and backwardness, in which lenses you can actually think about marginality and backwardness in India. Uh, what is the social or political agents behind this marginality? What type of social category you can identify as the reason behind this marginality? In that question, there is I was working on my PhD. There was interesting debate uh, happened in Kerala when the Travancore Hindu state was there. Travancore state once announced that Muslims will be given, will give scholarship, just like if they recognize caste as a kind of a prime category of their backwardness, just like Dalit Christians. So one Muslim magazine responded on that time, 1930. Uh, yes, we have backwardness. We have certain kind of backwardness. Muslims are in that magazine also regularly they are producing Muslim burgers in Trivandrum city, etc., etc. Why Muslims movements are not looking into the plight of poor Muslims and all. There is a lot of discussion was happening on that time. But this magazine's editorial strongly opposed the recognition of caste as a category of backwardness of Muslims or welfare of to recognize caste as a social phenomena uh, through which this welfare has to be allotted to the community. For that reason, they said that okay, caste is a kind of a Hindu idea. That idea is totally opposite with Islamic idea of brotherhood or fraternity, whatever. So we will not recognize this. We will not recognize a kind of lower caste, but we will recognize the backwardness. So if government want to give some kind of scholarship or welfare schemes, they want to address this issue. This was that editorial. But now you can see that after independence, or even in Kerala state, Muslims are come under other backward list. There is a long trajectory for that. And even now, the backwardness of this debate already have done many political scientists in India, especially after Sachar committee report. What is the how this backwardness we can, what kind of social category can be look for backwardness, whether it is caste, class, or religion can be a idea of religion is a reason behind the backwardness in India in the majoritarian situation. So this discussion actually in one level is happening. You can see after this post-Sachar debates, you can see whether Muslim can be given reservation, if give reservation, which basis. That discussion is there if religion can be a category, or even still is a kind of a heated debate in the political spectrum. In another level, idea of citizenship also changing in one level, kind of differentiated citizenship is emerging within community also. Various movements are also rising. For example, Muslim even movements, or even in North Indian context, Pasmanda Muslim movements, and even some OBC movements in Maharashtra, OBC Muslim movements in Maharashtra, that kind of states. They are also rising uh, to recognize certain kind of practices within the community. That is the main reason behind the uh, uh, marginalization. So um, here here lies a major problem, because which category you will recognize as one of the fundamental problem for your marginalization. Uh, Whether that recognition, for example, it's in a Odisha context, there is an interesting work on violence of recognition. It's actually about the tribals and Dalit Pana community, the tribal Gonda community conflict that lead to the Kandamal violence, etc. In that context, that book was written. It's a very beautifully, very interesting work on this recognition, the authenticity of recognition, and the authenticity of claim on the state welfare or state affirmative action. That's lead to the violence between tribal community and Dalit community, Dalit Christian community in Odisha. In that context, the writer asked that whether the recognition without a redistributive agenda, recognition without identifying, in her language, it is a racial capitalist mode of working, how it will affect the communities. It is actually, as Gopal Guru pointed out, when just after the Sachar committee report, I think Soya Hassan edited a volume in which he mentioned the subclassification debate within the Dalit community, and that led to the major conflict in Andhra Pradesh. Uh, so he mentioned that how this recognition without redistribution is actually leading into the fight within margin rather than fight from margin against uh, the forces behind the marginalization. So, when we now discuss the marginalization of Muslims, a Muslim community, we have to actually think about this state recognition and the community, differentiated citizenship claims within the community, and obviously you have to also think about this aspect of the complex aspect of the recognition, violence of recognition, and the conflict within margins, and the less recognition of the idea behind the marginalizations. So I think this is the crucial issue we have to be think over when we discuss Muslim marginality now. Um, I think maybe Saidalavi can more elaborate on this, when how the caste question emerging as a fundamental kind of idea of marginality, especially in North Indian Muslim belt, the Pasmanda question have emerged as a kind of uh, uh, serious question about Muslim marginality, whether which Muslim is marginal, which Muslim is not marginal. That kind of questions spark the debate even academia and even social movement level also.
Yeah, thank you for that. So yeah, here comes the idea of caste, of the debate of caste to our discussion. So yeah, when we talk about Muslim marginality from its broader point of view, I think as Sadiq has pointed out, there are two two different ways in which through which Muslims connect to the idea of caste. What is the caste among them, or arguably something that can be called caste among Muslims or among the margin, and obviously that makes the Muslim marginalization as a layered phenomenon, who are more marginalized than some other within the within the margin. And secondly, obviously, caste as a general category in Indian society is also largely connected to Muslim Christian. I think that is what Sadiq tried to elaborate by bringing up this, how Muslims can, claim over the affirmative actions of the state by letting themselves to be recognized as caste category. For example, if you look at the Constitution has recognized religion as a cultural category. Because of that, we cannot claim religious reservation through the constitutional means. But on the other hand, you have caste as a political category recognized by the constitution, through which you can, legitimately claim reservation or caste reservation for that matter. So, how do you understand Muslim marginalization? Is it religious um, marginalization? If it is religious marginalization, how do you recognize this form of religious marginalization within the constitution, other than as a cultural category? So this is a puzzling question, I think. But moving forward, um, we see Saidarabi, who have very much worked in the question of caste among Muslims, and he has a forthcoming book titled "Seeking Allah's Hierarchy: Caste, Labor, and Islam in India." So I think he would be able to shed more light on this discussion in relation to caste.
Assalamu alaikum. Dr. Sadiq has already kind of put a lot of things on our table. So let me kind of touch upon a few things that he has already mentioned, just to kind of, as a foray into the discussion of caste. So in our title, so there is the term unstratified, and there is also the term marginality, about which Sadiq has elaborately talked about. So when we are usually thinking about the idea of marginality, we are already kind of, presupposing the idea of a center or the idea of a mainstream. So if you are kind of, thinking with this kind of a binary, how is our marginality placed? So Sadiq has already kind of given a lot of insights into this. Just to reiterate, some of the findings coming from Sachar Committee report, and later a report commissioned by National Commission for Minorities, by Satish Deshpande and Geetika Bapna. And all these scholars and this committee, through their surveys, ethnographic works, and the findings of NGO groups, they found that Muslims across India, particularly Muslims who are kind of concentrated districts across the country, they are facing various kinds of discrimination. So this discrimination could be in terms of getting for example, a loan from the bank. So if you are a Muslim, it is harder to get a loan. So it could also be about purchasing certain lands, so purchasing certain property, even renting property. If you are kind of moving to, particularly, in our own surroundings, we know that, Muslims are concentrated in certain areas, let's say Jamia Nagar. So we know that it's a Muslim area. So this kind of a kind of a segregation in terms of housing, it's a kind of a historical process. This did not start today or yesterday. It has a long history, even going back to the time of partition at least. So that is one, in terms of segregation with the mainstream, where you are segregated in terms of housing, in terms of securing certain kinds of provisions of the state, including lending, bank, all that. That is one. this marginality can also manifest in various kinds of institutions. For example, you are a Muslim, you are going to a government office. So by seeing that you are a Muslim and you may be kind of called to produce lot more documents than other beneficiaries may require to produce. So these kinds of various kinds of official hurdles may also be put in as a way to keep your marginalization in place. So if you are kind of thinking about this in terms of the state, as Sadiq has already said, so we are getting a kind of a broader picture across India. So this is not a phenomenon specific to Delhi, specific to Uttar Pradesh, or specific to Kerala even. So this is across the board. Now, so that is one level. Now we also have this idea of unstratified, as kind of as the organizers have beautifully imagined. So we already think of the idea of the ummah, for example, for the community. So we are a kind of a single, so Muslims as a brotherhood, Muslims as a community, Muslims as a ummah. So there is that kind of an imagination that we have arising from our own religious tradition. That is one. So now how do we kind of bridge these two? One is the idea of the ummah that we have, a notion of a homogeneous community, and then we also have a certain kind of a marginalization, a certain kind of a discrimination, even in cases institutionalized at the realm of the state. So where does this meet? One at the level of the community, one at the level of the state. So kind of to think about this, we also have two other categories, in the title itself. The idea of identity and the idea of the caste. I will come to the idea of caste later. Let's think about the idea of identity. Are we, as Muslims, a homogenized community? I'm sure all of us. Let's say kind of just for an example, we know that this program is being organized by Jamaat Islami or SIO. So kind of if you kind of look, let's say 500 meters from here, you will see various other organizations. We know that we have Maslaki differences. We have Jamaat, we have Ahl Hadith, we have Barelvi, all that. So that is one form of a differentiation that is there within the community. Beyond this, we have to imagine let's say, we have to imagine an ummah. Is that possible? That is one question. Okay. So that is if we are kind of holding on to the idea of the identity. So that is one. The second, as Sadiq has also mentioned, this can also be thought in terms of regional identity. Whether, so for example, all of us are actually coming from Kerala. So I have heard, myself. So people will ask, so what's your name? So I say my name. So my name is a little quote unquote weird name. So North Indian Muslims may not immediately say that. Sayyid Alawi, it's not a Muslim name. So people will ask, are you Sayyid Alawi? Then I have to say, no, that's not it. Then I have to tell a story. So what the point is, then they will ask. So then they will start speaking in Urdu. Then I'll say, no, I cannot speak Urdu. Then I have heard myself, many people ask, oh, are you a Muslim? Let's say, just to think about the idea of the region, the idea of the language. That is one kind of a difference. It's not a huge difference. So kind of, people, even Muslims in Karnataka speak Urdu, maybe it is only us and some Tamils, Bengalis, who do not speak Urdu much. So that is one. Now, the idea of caste. What does caste do? So, one, we talked about the idea of the ummah, then we talked about the idea of marginality in terms of the state. So, what is caste? So, Manshad has already mentioned, this is also a political category. This is also a state governance category. So, it is on the idea of the caste that certain groups are given various kinds of provisions from the state, including educational opportunities, employment, even kind of ration, for example. All this is possible. Now, what does this idea of caste do to Muslims? Is there caste among Muslims? No. Yeah, all of you are saying, we will, yeah, we will all say that there is no caste. Why do we say that? Caste can only exist among Hindus, let's say. So, why do we say that, there is caste only exists among Hindus? We have ideas of Brahmins, we have ideas of Kshatriyas, we have ideas of Vaishyas, we have ideas of Shudras. Are there Shudras among Muslims? All of you will say no, no, no. Let's go with that. Now, if we are using, so I don't want to kind of go on with that debate much, just to stick with this category, what does this caste does? The category caste helps us to open a Pandora's box in terms of thinking about marginality among Muslims using a different kind of a framework. This framework is not in terms of Maslaki difference. This framework is not based on category things that the state provides. So far, the state has not recognized. Then this category also kind of complicates the idea of the Ummah. So I'll stop there, then kind of, we'll, in the next iteration, we'll take that further.
Yeah, sure. I think Siddharve has introduced idea of caste among Muslims and whole debate around it. So, whenever we talk about caste among Muslims, there are one most important puzzling question that arises. Um, so, so there are scholars, there are bunch of scholars who have extensively talked about caste among Muslims and it's a political force as for now. And those works have been trying to theorize caste among Hindus. What are, for example, what are the markers of caste? How do we understand caste in terms of the markers of caste? But when we come to Muslims or the Muslim community and the phenomenon of caste, um, can we really call whatever that phenomena is out there? Can we really call that caste? Because caste is something that has been put out by at least argument by colonialists to talk to talk about a particular social phenomena called jati back then. So can we use the same term to talk about or to recognize or to understand this particular phenomenon among Muslims? My question, or this is not a question but something that to start to talk about. Sadi.
Okay. Uh, See, I already pointed out the backwardness within the Muslim community is recognized by state, and even Muslim leaders or Muslim movements will recognize. How we can understand, how we can, as a social fact, how we can analyze and understand uh, the different aspect of that marginality or backwardness. There is from I think the question of uh, caste, maybe at least in academic level, for example, India's Ahmad studies and all, it's coming not put not it's a kind of it first came not as a marker of backwardness rather than a question of what we say that a kind of a plurality of religious Muslim lives in India, how they actually assimilated certain kind of local social system, social order or social customs into their practices. So that was the main thrust behind the articulation of, on that time, eloquently they speak about stratification rather than caste. Uh, so they identified the stratification, and the stratification pattern just like caste-like stratification. Even some scholars on that time added that caste-like stratification. For example, you can find out one of the earlier volume edited by, I think, Dr. F.R. Faridi, in which the social stratification among Muslims in India. It's published by, I think, Institute of Objective Studies. It's a kind of symposium organized in Aligarh Muslim University, in which they pointing out the caste-like stratification. The pattern of stratification and its commonality with the caste. But the thing is different when the social movements have emerged. The praxis emerged within the community, and they have raised, at least many movements have raised caste-like practices, and caste as a kind of a South Asian phenomena, not merely in certain kind of religious groups, but it's a kind of a South Asian phenomena. The order of social here in South Asian continent. So in which Muslims also actually accepting the stratification pattern of, that was the argument. Okay, so obviously that argument later put forward, because there is two reasons for that. One, movements have emerged, they have to push their argument, and the state also has to recognize some kind of category to look after the Muslim backwardness. So they put the backwardness, caste backwardness, as a kind of easy category rather than religion as a kind of category. It will create a lot of problems. So caste become a kind of backwardness based on caste-like stratification. That's why earlier in 1970 onwards, Muslims of Kerala is in other backward category. Recently in some other states also trying to get into that status for Muslims after Sachar Committee report. So that's now a huge debate. Even last election debate, Modi have pointed out that no, these people will give everything to the Muslims, Dalit reservation will go, and etc. 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 So then the lot of studies have emerged on caste and caste practices within the Muslim community, various aspects of untouchability, and even important work, I think, how it's theologically sanctioned, textually sanctioned. Obviously, I think Zindagi Now, that have published a series of articles by Masood Alam Falahi, I think 10 or 12 years, 13 years back. Dr. F.R. Faridi was the editor of that magazine. So in which he actually identified certain kind of idea in fiqh, just like kufu, how it's actually reproducing the caste-like endogamous practices within the Muslim community, how theologically it is sanctioned. But interesting thing is that how then how you can actually look up. There is two questions emerged. One is, for example, Professor G. Aloysius. He asking, then how you will understand the difference Islam make within caste or the condition of caste. That was the crucial question emerged. What, for example, if you agree with one point that caste is the fundamental idea of stratification, and it is actually laying here after long years, and it is influencing. What is the power? What is the why this social category is getting that kind of power, a kind of a mother culture power? So why you are not looking into the difference that made on and made off caste? For example, Christianity or Islam or what other religion? That is one set of questions. Second thing, very interestingly, even maybe Saidal we can more elaborate on that. I have only looking the movement, not particularly practices. Many of these movements, even now emerging in Kerala or even Masood Alam Falahi, is suggesting that how you engage with the caste within the Muslim community. His idea is dawa and islah. Okay, dawa and islah as a category, you can fight back the Muslim caste practices. In Kerala, even some of the movements that engaging in this caste-like practices within the Muslim, especially barber community movements and all, they are also trying to, for example, in fiqh, some of the fiqh debates, they have to find out a kind of different kind of interpretation for certain kind of things. So that based on larger idea of Islamic principles of brotherhood, I mean akhlaq versus kufr, or even Islah versus the unjust practices, etc., etc. So how you deal with the theological resource with it. So my contention is that why that kind of there are obviously many movements are now asking for recognition from the government of caste exists within the Muslim community. On that basis, they are also seeking the affirmative action. That movement is going on, that is pending in Supreme Court now. But now various Dalit movements recently came openly against this. Even Dilip Mandal and all raising huge campaign against Dalit Muslim or reservation to the Muslims and Dalits. So behind that there is a logic, that why this reservation is not given to the Dalits and Muslim converts. It's simply that to maintain the majority, the notion of majority fault. Then how you will engage with this? Then the Hindu majority question has to be sustained. You have to or you have to actually the question of this caste has to be engaged through the theology, or you engaged through the state recognition and this reification of that identity within the community. That confusion is still there, and meanwhile the question also, what kind of difference on or off that category will make on Muslims. So I think that are the questions emerging. Now I am again going back to the earlier work I have mentioned about Priti Hotta's work. The whatever recognition within the state is getting, how that recognition will lead to the redistribution, representation, and finally the reframe the system. So in one realm you have to think, now it's a thinking within the margin itself, for example subclassification debate, whatever reservation within the Muslim community debate, it is within. How you can actually think more about above, not more, above this line, then open up a certain kind of idea, then I think it will lead to the many other questions in India, question of nationalism, question of majoritarianism. That is a clear-cut link with that. Until unless if you are not asking that question, then again it's it's a kind of recognition by violence by recognition. In another level, you can also think about the idea of Muslimness. Idea of Muslimness, one is Muslims' self-identification as a Muslim. Other is the state or oppressive forces identifying a Muslim. For example, in Uttarakhand, the one Gujjar community is a tribal Muslim community. is largely discriminated, largely excluded and largely discriminated. Nowadays they are facing existential threat by destructing their property, by forcefully removing them their habitat. There's a tribal community. So by indicating their Muslim identity, uh, so what the meaning of Muslimness in India, that's again is which is merely a kind of a theological or madhabi maslaki kind of thing, or is a category of deprivation. Muslimness as a kind of category of deprivation, exclusion, and a kind of existential problem of marginality in India. So this is this clue I am taking from obviously larger critical Muslim studies idea. How we can think about Muslimness, not merely as a kind of a theological or construct, rather than how in this context how we can actually imagine Muslimness and caste again. Then I think we can probably probe into the further complicate without going into the trap set by the state recognition, not recognition debate.
I think that's a really important aspect to this whole debate. I mean, how do these two categories, Muslimness as well as the caste category, overlap, or the Muslimness, especially in the context of India, comes forth than the category of caste. So I think Said Alavi has a more field experience as a ethnographer. He has worked among, I believe, that he has worked among various castes, Muslims, as a part of his book writing and thesis. So he would be able to take up this debate that Sadiq has talked more further.
Yeah, Sadiq has already kind of, he's already throwing a lot of things on the table, in each of his iterations. So let's kind of, going back to the idea of caste. So when did this caste become a question for Muslims? So you can actually go back to the time of the British, and then you can say, so when British colonial officials started categorizing and tabulating Indian population, caste became a category, not about Muslims, okay? Caste became a general category to tabulate communities across India. So the main problem was that their idea of caste, as Manshad has said, so there are two ideas of caste. One is the idea of caste in terms of jati, so which is, kind of, now we are saying that, in India, there are more than 3,200 jatis across India. So that is one. But also caste in terms of this Varna hierarchy that I just mentioned, the Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, kind of a thing. Now the task that was given to the colonial officials was to tabulate Indian population into these categories. This is one, okay, not just about caste. They were also categorizing tribes, they were also categorizing non-Hindu communities. That was also happening. But a major thrust was to tabulate people into caste. Now, many communities across India started having problems. For example, so the place that three of us are coming from, there is a category called an Nair. So Nair, as a kind of, it is understood to be a Shudra category, but they are the dominant caste in Kerala. So they were saying that, no, we are not Shudras, we are Kshatriyas. So this kind of a problem was happening from late 19th century onwards, particularly from 1891, when various groups started making demands on the state, saying that, no, we are not this caste. Maybe we have this name called, let's say, Nair, but we do not belong to Shudra, we belong to Kshatriya category. This was the problem that the colonial officials were having to solve. Among Muslims, whether this terminology can be used whether it shouldn't be used. That was a debate, a huge debate. But there were already kind of the idea of ethnicity by which Muslims could be categorized. So the idea of caste in North India is kind of, if you are familiar, there are three terms that we use: the Ashraf, the Ajlafs, and the Arzals. So the Ashraf, so all these people, communities belonging to or claiming to belong to this category, they say that we have immigrated from various parts of Persia, all that region, So now we are different from the indigenous Muslims. This was one. So this was a huge difference that existed even in 19th century. Even now this exists. Okay. So these particular groups started saying that we do not have anything to do with indigenous Muslims. We are sharifs. So that was the term that they used. That was one. Now, for example, in a place like Kerala, this kind of an Ashraf does not exist, or they are minuscule. So when the census was happening, maybe there were, let's say, 1,000 Navaiti Muslims, Bohras, people of that kind, that existed. The dominant people who were in Kerala were identified as Mappilas. So Mappilas constitute around 80% of Muslims in Kerala. Okay, so that became one kind of a category that they used. So there were also other kind of categories. For example, there is a term called Pudiya Islam. I'm sure both of them are familiar with this term. So Pudiya Islam is a kind of a term that is still used for converts to Islam. So Pudiya means new. So Pudiya Islam means new convert to Islam. So this is a kind of a general category that still exists. But in 1891 census, if you look at Madras census reports, you can actually see that particularly the fishermen community have been identified as Pudiya Islam, meaning new convert. So why I am saying this is the idea of classifying, the idea of tabulating communities and categorizing them as caste was a fraught exercise in colonial India. Okay, it is just to emphasize that I am saying that. So now we have to think about caste in other terms, not by kind of hinging upon the idea of colonial construction of caste. Now how are we kind of thinking about caste today? If you are looking at movements that are happening in North India, particularly Pasmanda, Muslim Mahaz, organizations of that kind, they are using caste as a, just to use the way Gopal Guru talks about the idea of Dalit as a struggle concept. So the idea of caste among Muslims is a struggle concept, in the sense that Muslim political movements and social movements are using the category of caste to talk about marginality among Muslims. So why did this emerge? As Sadiq has already mentioned, so we have lot of governmental programs, let's say OBC, reservation, all kinds of things are happening. This has been happening from the emergence of the state in India, post-colonial state in India from 1947 onwards. Look at the institutions, that we are adjacent to, Jamia Millia Islamia or Aligarh Muslim University. So these are institutions that the community has got on the basis of marginality recognized by the state, that Muslims are marginal, Muslims are not getting educational opportunities, Muslims do not have educational institutions. This is a kind of a larger debate. So these Muslims also do not get enough governmental opportunities in terms of employment and all that. If you are actually doing a census even today, this is the condition. Overall, Muslims are lagging behind. That is true even today. Now, when we are thinking about or bringing the idea of caste, there is something else that is happening, which is we are trying to look at the idea of, let's say, Ashraf, Ajlaf and Arzal. Then we see something else. Now, all these institutions that we boast of as belonging to Muslims, they are managed by, owned by, run by particular groups among Muslims. Mostly they belong to Ashrafs, okay, the kind of the Sharif classes. This, so why I am saying this caste is a struggle concept is to think about this marginality in a different way, not in terms of thinking about the state. Thinking, so kind of, Sadiq has also beautifully said that, how do we think about the idea of Muslimness? So that's what this category tries to kind of agitate against or struggle with. So when we are bringing this idea of caste among Muslims, we have to think about the way marginality operates among Muslims, within Muslims. On what basis is Muslims segregated? On what basis are Muslims marginalized? Is it in terms of one's own identity as belonging to or doing particular, engaging in particular professions? So I have primarily worked on Muslim barbers, okay? So kind of, in North Indian case, I'm sure, Nai, Nai, so Nai caste. So among Muslims in Kerala, we call them Osan. So this is a kind of, if you are thinking about this category itself, this is a derogatory category for them. So whether we kind of, whether we kind of recognize it as a derogatory concept is out of the picture. If you are kind of talking to these barbers, they are saying that we are being profiled by using this category, Nai or Osan. So it is to kind of think about these kinds of marginalization within Muslims that this category caste is useful. Now what is this caste as a category? So that itself is a kind of a huge debate. That as Sadiq and Manshad has already mentioned, Sadiq has beautifully kind of illustrated its trajectory. It was used particularly among Muslims to think about how do we live in India along with other communities. How do we say that? This was one, okay? So this is a kind of a debate that is happening from the 1950s to, let's say, 1990s. When caste is used among Muslims to say that, no, we are not different. We are also like other communities here. We also have caste. So this is, scholars like Louis Dumont, Imtiaz Ahmad, even kind of, the idea of caste like, that Sadiq mentioned, it is coming from that kind of a trajectory, saying that Muslims are not different. We are also living in India. We also have been influenced by things happening in India. So this was also a kind of a political kind of a question to say that we are not different. So this kind of an expediency also existed, particularly after independence partition. Muslims, particularly in North India, had to say that, no, we are not demanding a separate state. We are Indians. We want to be Indians. Look at our social organization. We also have imbibed a lot of cultural practices from you. We are not different. So this has that kind of a trajectory, okay, the political expediency that Sadiq was talking about. From the 1990s onwards, this takes a different turn to say, to what I was talking as a struggle concept. How do we think about Muslim marginality within us? So if you are kind of moving to that, then there is the problem of so I am actually kind of reiterating or emphasizing things that Sadiq has already mentioned. So if you are kind of using this caste as a struggle concept, there is a huge problem, which is that it is not about the state. It is not about recognition. If it is about the state, if the Muslim caste is about state, if the Muslim caste is about reservation, we can do things like kind of saying that we need a recognition, we are underprivileged. So that's a struggle the Pasmanda kind of groups are doing. I think that's not the central problem. I think this is what Pasmanda groups have got wrong, which is to say, how do we think about Muslim theology or Islamic theology? So as Muslims, as Sadhika was also mentioning, if we are kind of thinking about Muslimness and caste, we have to think about Islam. Without thinking about Islam, you cannot talk about caste, you cannot talk about the state, you cannot talk about marginality. So if you are looking at the debates that is happening in North India particularly, they are not taking the idea of Islam seriously. So how do we think about that? So I'll stop there, and then if you have, yeah.
Yeah, we're actually running a little bit late, but I wanted to take some questions from the audience. But before that, I want to ask a final question to Sadika as well. From where Saidalabi has stopped. So this theology is a important point of discussion when we talk about caste. So most of the, I mean, whenever we talk about caste among Hindus, sometimes we oversight or we overlook the presence of theology there. I mean, in caste in Hinduism. I mean, we mostly don't consider that they have a theological, kind of legitimization to that practice. Whereas when we come to Islam on the other side, even if we can recognize caste-like practices among Muslims, we have a not one or two, we have various theological values or theological categories to effectively fight these caste-like practice or whatever. So how do you think? And this, I think, this theological aspect of Islam and to some extent Christianity as well has transmuted or transformed the caste practices in India as well in many ways. So how do you see that?
Uh, this is we have to elaborate more on a complexity of caste and caste debates. But I think I am not going into that detail. But you think about the theology of caste and theology speaking to the caste. For example, in India, you can see that that two things happened many times. Uh, Maybe theology of caste come later when Ambedkar revolution and counter revolution. The theology of caste established to actually stop a kind of social justice, etc. That kind of values. That's Ambedkar argument. Even coming to the Muslim the caste among Muslim questions and the question of Islam that Said Ali also pointed out, when we actually not recognizing the theology or textual practices that may be maintaining a caste-like practices and the challenge against within the theological practices. That even interestingly, I actually uh, uh, talk with many movements. So many of them are pious Muslims. I mean, recently during the COVID time in Kerala, there is one incident happened in one masjid. Somebody have said that a son of Osan and prostitute will not be married to a Muslim. That kind of a speech one Maulavi have given. It became a huge discussion within the WhatsApp circle and all. You know that a movement meme is taken it as a serious kind of thing. But interestingly, the that Maulavi came to give a speech there. The imam of that mosque was coming from Barbar community. So you think he actually raised this issue within the mosque, and he reached that issues into the meme, and the meme actually what they have done, they have done meet all the Muslim organizations. and they have a kind of debate with all Muslim organizations. When I think even in Kerala, Samasta have taken certain kind of decision based on that. Uh, so there are actually even in Masood's work is talking about Dawa Islah against Kufu as a kind of hierarchical vision. So the claim on the theology you have to be seriously taken, and how and another experience. One of my friend, he was a Dalit activist. Some of you maybe know, he running Dalit Camera. He recently converted to Islam. He converted to Islam not as a kind of a political activism, not a kind of spiritual kind of journey. So his idea also, he was thinking about caste, a kind of uh, end within the fold he is living. He does not want any recognition from that identity. He moved to another identity. So he's thinking to refusal of a certain kind of recognition. In that level, he was even thinking about to even he will not demand reservation. That's why he was even personally we are very good friends. I asked him, you still uh, uh, hang your name, that itself, not need to be changed some kind of name. You can have a solidarity with Muslims and all. But he said that no, I am not recognizing that identity. The refusal to the recognition given by certain kind of
Something similar to Malcolm X.
yeah, something similar to Malcolm X. This is obviously his inspiration is Malcolm X. So this is very crucial. Even this refusal to recognition is not a kind of easy task, because no welfare and no empowerment is a very keen. So if you want to, one way you have to recognize the recognition given by state or whatever, and you have to refusal what is the thing. Where I think theology will have a kind of a place there. You can give a kind of a refusal to recognition. Meanwhile, you are recognized by certain kind of backward group within the larger governance paradigm. So in that level also, the question of Islam, Muslimness is coming as a kind of a crucial factor. Then another important thing you have, okay, so uh, and again let me conclude by saying that so we have to recognize caste as a kind of a category, critical category, engage with the social stratification and discriminatory practices within the Muslim communities. One category, obviously, gender and other categories will also emerge as a kind of, and how you are getting recognition within the state. One interesting thing, one of my friend who is actually working within the Berber community, is well educated, is a teacher and principal director in one college. He told me, I shifted my house from Muslim area to the non-Muslim area. So the reason he elaborated that in Muslim area I am a barber, in non-Muslim area I becoming a Muslim. So he want to get a Muslimness only when he shifting his house into a non-Muslim area. There he is a Muslim, and he said that again only one another place I am feeling Islamic when I recite Quran or something. So these three level of understanding, one level within the Muslims you are merely barber. Whatever education you have, whatever things you have, you will always be reminded your this identity. But for in its new neighborhood is a Muslim. So the Muslim, the prejudice, stereotypes also will come along with that. And in one level he is saying that okay, in one level I am doing all these activities and all, I am finding a kind of Muslimness while my spiritual kind of practices. So this three aspect is there. So how as a Muslim social movements or Muslim students movement engage with these three aspects and think about the Muslim marginality in India, it's I think a very crucial kind of thing. Obviously we have to be more categories, more exploration on how you can think about by considering these three aspects. That is the challenge before us. Then only the idea of caste also become a kind of radical critical category. Otherwise it become a governance kind of category that sustain the majoritarian notions that still prevail in India.
Yeah, just to kind of as a final remark, so this idea of Islam, why we need to kind of think about this seriously. Just to give you an example, so unlike let's say many northern parts, Kerala, so we kind of we pride in saying that Islam came to Kerala at the time of Prophet Muhammad himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is some claim, kind of we have lot of stories to ascertain that Islam has come in 8th century at the time of Prophet. So now think about this in relation to caste. So when did Islam emerge in Arabia? Let's say 7th century. So we are talking about Kerala for let's say at least 1200 years, 1200 years. Muslims have been there in Kerala. Now let's say caste. So whether how do we understand that, all that is a kind of a complex issue. Let's just think about this. So Muslims have been living in Kerala for 1200 years and Islam did nothing to that. The idea of caste, if that existed, let's say whether that existed, in what form, that's a complex question. Let's just think about as a kind of an imaginary problem. If caste existed among Hindus in 8th century Kerala, Islam came in 8th century and over these 1200 years Islam did nothing. So that's an impossible thing to even imagine. So this is why the category of Islam needs to be seriously analyzed to think about caste among Muslims, which is a kind of a fault line in thinking about caste as a political problem, as a governance problem, the way Pasmanda Muslims activists are doing. Now, just to kind of, I do not know whether Sadiq is actually mentioning the same incident, that I am going to refer to. This is also something that I talk about in my forthcoming book. So this incident, I think, you are kind of referring to the same incident. So because of my ethnography, I did field work and I kind of talked to people, who were part and parcel of this whole debate. So I've got, I think, I've got a little richer picture to that story. So this happened in, I think, not in, I don't know whether this happened in, no, this did not happen in COVID time. I think this happened in 2018 or 19. I've kind of specifically mentioned in the book the particular date, time, and all that. This happened at the time of Ramadan, okay, in 2018 or 2019. I don't know whether you are talking about the incident that happened in Patambi Mosque.
Yeah, but
Yeah. So this is the kind of, so I think, as an ethnographer, as an anthropologist, I've got a little more details. That's what. So the kind of, the kernel of the story is the same. So, but why I'm going to the detail is to say that, there is a kind of a deeper problem that as a Muslim organization, all of us, or as Muslims, all of us have to think about. So this in 2018 or 19 Ramadan, a Maulavi, so he is also kind of a, so this Patambi Mosque, so this is a kind of a southeast Malabar. So Malabar is the northern part of Kerala, where during Ramadan, after the Taraweeh prayer, there is usually a sermon, a kind of a, what do you call it in Urdu, I don't know, Bhashan, let's say. There is a Bhashan. So in which the Imam answers the questions that the community has in terms of, let's say, so how should I do my prayer? Things of that kind, and the fiqh issues, that, or moral issues, or the issues of akhlaq that we deal every day. So this audience ask these kinds of questions. So this is also a town mosque where nearly 400 Muslims gather, for the prayer. So it was a huge audience. So where one of the members of the audience asked whether we can follow somebody who has become a kind of an alim, let's say. So, but he is a son of an adulteress. Whether we can follow him in prayer as a ma'mum. So this was the question. In answering this question, the Imam said that the way we cannot follow a son of a barber, we cannot also follow a son of an adulteress. This is a kind of this is the issue that emerged. So one of the audience was a barber, so who raised this issue in a family WhatsApp group. It's become a kind of a huge thing, and barbers went to the kind of, they called, and I've got a lot of phone conversations, with this Imam, kind of, this is why I'm saying, caste is a struggle concept. They are kind of challenging him and asking him, show us the jurisprudential text, show us the fiqh text. Where are you reciting this issue from? Where is the kind of hadith that you can recite to elucidate your claim? Where is the evidence from Quran? So these are the kind of questions, that barbers are asking. Now, this was raised in a family WhatsApp group, and then this became a huge issue, and ultimately the Imam had to apologize and say that it was a slip of tongue. I haven't seen anything of this kind in any of the jurisprudential texts, that a barber's son cannot be followed in prayer as a ma'mum. Now, this is one kind of an incident. Now, the Muslim organization, particularly barber organizations, have taken up this issue, and they have gone to various Muslim organizations, including Jamaat-e-Islami. Now, various religious leaders have said, no, kind of, it is true, this has happened, kind of, please forgive, maaf kar do, all these kinds of things say. So these religious leaders belonging to various organizations, I'm not kind of, pinpointing, let's say, Bareilly, Ahle Hadith or Jamaat-e-Islami, all these organizations are same in this case. There is no difference in kind of hesitance to recognize this as a struggle problem among Muslims. Now they talked to various organizations. As organizations, they have said, we'll take up this issue in our kind of mushawara and all those kinds of things, but nothing has happened. This has been 4 or 5 years now, nothing has happened. So I feel, and I kind of, this is also something that I say through my book, that, this is going to be the emerging political and theological problem for Muslims. This is going to be the struggle for 21st century for Muslims. How do we kind of theologically or organizationally address the problem of caste among Muslims? So why this is going to be a problem is that the kind of the social groups among Muslims, such as barbers, are challenging the established practices, hierarchical mentalities that are existing among Muslims, among all of us. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, I think we are running out of time. So I wanted to take up some questions. If you have, I can only take up one or two questions that you very brief as much as possible. If anyone has anything.
Mujahid.
I have one question regarding politics. Does caste play a political role among Muslims? If yes, then how marginality of Muslims affect it?
You want to go? So let's say kind of, I assume that, you are talking about politics in terms of, let's say, the state, in terms of recognition, in terms of redistributive agenda, things of that kind. That's what I assume. So if you are kind of thinking about politics in that sense, there is so one of the crucial demands from Pasmanda Muslim Mahas, kind of based in Bihar, they have been demanding that even the seats that are kind of being claimed, being represented by Muslims as a kind of a minority kind of concentrated areas. So kind of, I think it is 90 districts that Satish Deshpande and Geetika Bapna address, as Muslim concentrated districts across the country. So let's say if you are kind of thinking about Muslim political representation, one of the demands of the marginalized sections within Muslims has been that we should also get candidates from these kinds of groups. So if you kind of, if you particularly Pasmanda Muslims have been doing these kinds of tallies, and say that most of our political representatives come from the Sharif category. They are either Pathans, they are Sayyids, there are kind of other groups, Sheikhs, Siddiqui, all kind of other groups, that claim to be Sharifs. So there is kind of, if you are thinking about politics in terms of the state, there is already a demand. Now we can also think about politics as a kind of a problem among Muslims, even to claim theological articulations. So, for example, let's say barbers say that there is no discrimination in Islam. I'm sure all of you kind of. So this is why I was referring to the idea of the ummah. So we say, so in the Quran itself, Allah says, the most distinct in front of me is who? The pious, the one who has taqwa. So think about this. So it's a kind of an emancipatory category that is already available in Islamic theology. So particularly barbers are kind of hinging upon this to say that don't discriminate us. As barbers, don't profile us. Don't call me a Nai, don't call me an Asan. This is a kind of politics you can also think about in these terms. So kind of, there are two kinds of struggles that are happening. So what I am kind of feeling is that the latter kind of struggle is going to take over, Muslim imagination, in the recent times. That's what I feel.
Yeah,
Would you want to have a final remark?
concluding
If you
remarks.
conclude remark, then okay. The one thing is very clear. One, Muslims are Muslim as a category in India is one of the marginalized and facing many existential questions. But these existential questions has to be a kind of opportunity to open up a lot of other things surrounding within the community itself. For example, that's why uh, caste as a category or gender as a category, you can think over how the idea of the Muslimness has to be think, has to be imagined, conceptualized. And regarding the caste also, caste as a governance category, caste as a kind of political category, mobilizing category, struggle category, we have to actually think about a kind of anti-caste position within theologically itself, anti-caste position. That anti-caste position, no, even any kind of idea will not will work on abstract level. In societal level, how that anti-caste position is reflecting in your theological interpretation, in your Muslim movements activism, that can actually transform the society when radically reimagine the society. Obviously, the state have certain kind of idea to recognize, not recognize, and even if they recognize, they will have to give you a recognition without any kind of redistribution or representation, that kind of thing. But the theological commitment, for example, the even at least in southern India, large chunk of people have converted to the Islam. Uh, Islam as a kind of imaginative space for them to articulate their self without the barriers, social barriers. So that history we have. So how that history, the praxis, will be a resource to fight against the caste regime existing in our society and caste regime and caste practices within our society. That is the crucial question before us. Then only we can actually move, or otherwise we will always in margin. We can actually think about the marginality, a kind of critical position. That edge become a vantage point. From become we can actually envision, make a new horizon for a kind of emancipation, liberation, not only for Muslims but the entire society. For that, at least the recognition ourselves is needed. Obviously, the rest will come the late.
Yeah, thank you. I think that is that I can mark as a concluding words. And thank you so much for participating in this discussion and in accepting our invitation and to come over here. It was really good to talk and discuss all of these things. Thank you so much for giving this opportunity to us as well. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah.